Hey guys. Hey, we are super close to the end of the book. Chapter 21, okay? So here's chapter 21, Building Bridges. The 5 kids found themselves standing once again at the edge of the great chasm with a rushing stream below. The landscape on the other side was still shrouded in dense fog. The red sky was streaked with purple and hung with those bizarre sky pods that they had seen before. "Where's the bridge?" Levi said. It took them all a moment to realize that the Bridge of Tears, which they had seen plainly when they had first landed, was gone. "Ruach didn't tell us that the bridge was gone," Evan said. "Maybe Paneros knew he would be coming," said Xavier. "So we took out the only access we had." "How could he know?" Brianna asked. "Could he hear us talking in the cave?" "Perhaps he, or one of his spies, saw us land here and went to tell Paneros, and he just got suspicious," said Manuel, reasoning things out as he always did. "At any rate, the bridge is gone, so until Ruach builds another one, we will not be going to Skotos today. Which is a relief, to tell you the truth. I really did not want to venture out there on my first day here." Manuel pushed up his glasses and smiled crookedly. "We need a new plan." "I'm with Manuel," Evan added. "I say we head to the castle, grab some ice cream, and come up with a new plan." Xavier rolled his eyes. "Our instructions were to follow the instructions," he said, "which means doing what Ruach sent us here to do." "But how?" said Levi. "Should we climb down there and up the other side? Or jump like we did before?" Xavier looked down at the water thoughtfully, then shook his head. "The crest isn't there, so I don't think we should jump." "If we had some rappelling gear, it might be feasible," said Manuel, "or some materials whereby I could fashion a flying machine." "A flying machine?" Levi said, laughing. "Seriously?" "Well, I almost had one working at home until my father took it away." "Too dangerous," he said. Manuel shrugged, as if he still didn't understand the problem. "I read this book once where the hero threw a rope over a river and it caught on the other side, and then the characters ziplined over," Brianna said. "Maybe we could use our belts to do that." "That wouldn't work," said Evan with a roll of his eyes. "Actually, it's not a bad idea," said Xavier. "It's worth a try anyway." Brianna gave Evan a "so there" look, which he did his best to ignore. "Give me your belts," Xavier said. They each took off their belts and handed them to Xavier. "There's no way it will be long enough to go all the way across," Manuel said, shaking his head. "Oh, you haven't seen these belts in action," said Brianna with a smile. Xavier touched the ends of the belts together. They fused into one long, continuous belt, much to Manuel's astonishment. But still, he shook his head. "Still not long enough." Xavier gathered the belt up into a loop, like a cowboy does before roping a calf. He took a big breath and threw it across the chasm with all his strength. The belt unfurled, sailing through the air, then dropped down over the cliff edge. Manuel sniffed. "I thought so." "Try again," said Brianna. Xavier tried again and again, but the belt rope failed to make it all the way across the chasm, let alone grab onto something on the other side. "That didn't work," said Evan, glancing sideways at Brianna, who avoided his gaze. "I guess that means we are supposed to use the belts," said Xavier. He unhitched the belts and returned them to the others, who fastened them around their waists once more. "Now what?" said Levi. "Maybe we could cut down some of these tall trees and lash them together with the belts and lay them across." "What are we going to cut down trees with?" said Evan. While they continued to discuss ideas, Xavier gazed thoughtfully over the edge of the cliff to the stream. The instructions from the book rolled over and over in his head. The orb in his breastplate seemed to know what he was thinking, for the words beamed out and floated in the air before him. "Look straight ahead. Fix your eyes on what is before you." He looked up toward the other side of the chasm. He saw something, just a flicker at first. Then it grew steadier. A light? Shining through the thick fog on the other side. You wear the shoes of peace. Ruach's words tumbled in his head. He looked down at his boots. Then he turned to the other kids and exclaimed, "The shoes!" They stopped talking and looked at him, startled by his outburst. Xavier's face seemed to shine. Remember what Ruach said just before he disappeared? You wear the shoes of peace. It's the shoes that will get us across. Really? Said Brianna doubtfully. He looked down at her boots. Although still rather sparkly, they did not seem to be doing anything special at the moment. Are they going to fly us there? All the kids examined their boots, hoping to see them sprouting wings. Xavier set his jaw and moved to the lip of the cliff where the bridge had once stood. He gazed over the edge. It was a long, long way down. Fix your eyes. The voice was stronger, louder. Ruach's voice, calling him to look up, to focus. He looked to the light flickering through the fog on the other side of the chasm. The others were silent, watching him. He took a deep breath. Xavier, what are you doing? Evan cried. He went to grab his brother's arms, but it was too late. Xavier had already lifted one foot in the air as if he was about to ascend a staircase that wasn't there. Xavier kept his eyes on the light as he stepped up, not wanting to look down at the deep ravine below. The breath he had taken was locked in his chest as his foot descended, but then it stopped. On something. He glanced down quickly. A stone. The step of a stairway that hadn't been there a moment before. He let the air rush out of his chest in relief. Look, he heard Evan shout behind him. That step just appeared under his foot. Xavier let his lungs fill with air again, nearly laughing with relief and joy when he looked down and saw the stone step hovering under his outstretched foot. He stuck both arms out to steady himself and gain his composure. Look straight ahead, he shouted. See the light? Fix your eyes on what lies before you. He took another breath, and another step, and another stone appeared under his foot, floating in the air yet perfectly solid. But as soon as he lifted his other foot off the first step, it disappeared. It was as if the steps only became visible when the boot was actually touching it. The others laughed and cheered, thrilled by Xavier's discovery. It's amazing, said Brianna. Cool, said Levi. Kind of like Minecraft, said Manuel. Being the scientist, he had to know how things worked. He picked up a large pebble and knelt down at the edge of the cliff. Maybe the steps are there, we just can't see them. He tossed the pebble out onto the space where Xavier's first step had appeared. But the pebble didn't hit anything. It just dropped all the way down to the ravine below. Whoa, said Evan, watching. The step just disappeared. Xavier took another step, creating yet another stone under his foot. Come on, guys. Let's do this, Brianna said. We have to hurry before any bad guys see us. I don't think so, Manuel said. I'm sort of afraid of heights. This will cure you. Brianna stepped up to the cliff edge and focused her gaze on the light shining on the other side. Staring at the light made her feel calmer. She repeated the words in her head. Fix your eyes on what lies before you. She took a deep breath and stuck one foot into the air. For a heart-stopping moment, she thought she might tumble all the way down to the rocky stream below. But then her foot stopped on something solid. She glanced down quickly and saw a stone under her foot. She shrieked with delight. It's working! Levi went next, followed quickly by Evan. They also whooped victoriously as the steps appeared under their boots, allowing them to walk up the stairway, right over the top of the chasm. Don't look down, Xavier called out. Just keep looking at that light. Come on, Manuel, Levi said, beckoning him. You can do it. Manuel stood on the edge and wrung his hands nervously. Maybe I'll just wait here, he mumbled. Come on, Manuel, it's fun, said Brianna, jumping one-footed from one step to the next like she was playing hopscotch. The others laughed. They seemed to forget about the deadly rocks far below them and the enemy territory ahead of them. as they delighted in the newfound power of their boots. They were almost to the center when Xavier remembered how the bridge had looked different on the other side. Would the steps now change to metal beams, making them slip and fall? He began to wonder if there were spies of the enemy on the other side watching them, setting a trap. Other than the light, it was impossible to see anything in the fog. He thought he heard something, a fluttering noise, there and gone again. "Hey guys, quiet," he hissed at the other kids. They stopped talking and laughing. "Listen." For a moment, there was no sound but a mournful wind. The kids followed Xavier's gaze, looking straight ahead at the light shining out of the fog bank. Xavier took a long breath. "Okay, maybe it was nothing," he said, "but let's be quiet, okay? We don't need to call attention to ourselves." Xavier took another step, but before his boot could create another stone, the fog bank burst into motion, as if it had come alive. He knew instantly what it was. "Ents!" he shouted to the others. He stood still as the deadly horde advanced. The collective sound was a high-pitched wail that chilled him to his very bones. He raised his hands as if in readiness for their attack. "Don't look away from the light," he commanded, but he doubted the others could even hear his voice. "Ah!" shrieked Brianna, ducking, her hands flying over her face as the Ents swarmed over them, turning the very air above them in a sea of gray, beating wings. "Bean!" Levi shouted. He was behind her and could see her stone already fading because she was no longer looking at the light. He batted away the horrible butterflies, struggling to keep his focus, at the same time reaching forward to grab Brianna before her stone disappeared. "Bean, look ahead!" Brianna opened her eyes and tried to focus on the light. She teetered a bit before regaining her balance, her step reappearing. Levi took a breath of relief, but then he heard a cry behind him. Evan was so distracted by the Ents that when he tried to take a step, there was no stone under his foot at all. He started falling and screaming in terror, lurching forward and clutching at one of Levi's boots. He managed to hang on with one arm, his body dangling helplessly. Levi reached down to grab Evan's arm as it clutched his boots, still trying to focus on the light. "Evan!" shouted Levi. "Hang on!" Evan threw his other arm around Levi's boot, swinging his legs up to catch the stone, but he couldn't get a foothold. "Help!" Evan cried. Brianna reached back to grab Evan's belt to give him more leverage, flailing at the Ents with her free arm. "Go away!" she yelled. She took her eyes off the light as she fought the Ents, and her step began to fade. She cried out, wobbling dangerously. Xavier stole a glance behind him and saw Brianna about to fall. He reached back to steady her. "Look up!" he shouted. Then he took a step backward to the step Brianna was on. It began to solidify. Brianna righted herself, gasping. "Don't look at the Ents and don't look down, whatever you do," he told her. She nodded, refocusing, steadying her breath. She took a step forward to the next stone. Xavier knew Evan was in trouble, and he would have to turn his back on the light in order to help him. "Hang on, Van!" he shouted. He took a breath, then spun around and crouched low, reaching out his hand to Evan, whose arms had begun to slip from Levi's boots. "Take my hand," Xavier shouted to his brother. "Hurry!" "I can't," Evan sputtered, shaking his head and shutting his eyes. "Take my hand," Xavier shouted. "Now!" Evan gulped down air. If he let go of Levi's boot, he was more than likely to lose his grip altogether and fall straight down onto the rocks below. He stared at Xavier's outstretched arm, hovering a foot away. He saw Xavier's stone fading rapidly. In another moment, the stone would disappear and he would fall. It was now or never. Evan let go of the boot and grabbed onto Xavier's hand. Xavier, with a strength born of pure desperation, dragged Evan up and across Levi's step to his own, at the same time spinning them both around to face the light. "Look up," Xavier said. Evan raised his head, focusing on the light, trying to ignore the dive-bombing Ents. The step began to strengthen again, solid enough for them both to stand on. Levi slumped forward, exhaling air he'd been holding far too long. You okay? Xavier asked. Evan regained his balance, sucking in breaths, his face very pale. Thanks, he said, his voice cracking. Xavier put a hand on his shoulder, reassuring him. Keep going, he said. Stay focused. The ends can't hurt you as long as you fix your eyes on the light. Evan nodded and took another step, a new stone appearing under his foot. Xavier watched him, breathing deep, forcing air deep into his lungs. His chest felt curiously tight. Levi, he said. Yeah, I'm good, Levi said, his voice breathless but sure. But Manuel is still on the other side. Xavier sighed. You go with Evan, he said. I'll go back for him. He waited until Levi had passed him and was headed over the bridge. Then he steadied himself and called out, Manuel? I am here, said a frail voice. Xavier took a quick glance behind him and saw Manuel back on the cliff. I think I'll just wait here until you guys get back. I can be the lookout. Manuel, you need to stay with us, Xavier said, exasperated. Come on, just keep your eyes on the light on the other side and you'll be fine. No, thank you. I'm really sorry, but I can't do it. Xavier took a moment, pondering what to do. Should he leave Manuel behind? He was tempted. Manuel probably wouldn't be much help on this mission, and he might even be a big liability. Maybe it would be better if he just stayed on the bridge and waited. But Manuel had received the same instructions as the rest of them. He had to come. There must be a reason. Xavier didn't know what it was, but he knew he had to get Manuel to cross the chasm. Xavier could see the other kids moving forward steadily, doing their best to ignore the swooping Ents. They would be okay. He sighed. Keeping his focus on the light, he began backing up slowly, trusting that the steps he needed to stand on would be there. Ents flew at him, their red eyes flaring, taunting him. But they didn't shoot darts. They were just trying to distract him from the light. He tried not to think about the rushing water and boulders below. Fix your eyes. By the time he made it back to where Manuel stood, the others were nearly all the way to the other side. That was a relief anyway. Manuel, Xavier said, standing on the first step of the bridge. Come on, I'll help you. The Ents can't hurt you so long as you keep your eyes on the light. How do you know that? I just do, said Xavier. Look, it's just like before. When you jumped, you were fine, right? I suppose so. Just do it again. Your boots will carry you, but you have to do the walking. Xavier took another step up, a stone appearing under his foot. Fix your eyes. Manuel strained to gaze at the light on the other side. He found that once he did that, he didn't really notice the horrid flapping bugs quite so much. He took a deep breath and adjusted his glasses and took a step. 1, and then another. 2, he counted as he walked behind Xavier on the steps to the middle, where they started to descend to the other side. 25, 26, 27, he counted, focused on the lights. Ents flew around his head, but he continued to ignore them. Xavier was right. They couldn't hurt him as long as he didn't look at them. He smiled to himself, straightening his shoulders, quickening his step. He counted all the way to 47 before he realized he'd made it. The other kids began to cheer quietly as he stepped off the last stone and onto the solid ground. That wasn't so bad, was it? Said Levi, patting him on the back. I guess not, Manuel said, grinning broadly now. He turned to Xavier. Thank you for helping me. Xavier shrugged, grinning back. Then he turned to examine the surroundings. He couldn't see anything except fog. Skotos is pretty foggy, said Evan, mostly to himself. The light, Brianna said. The one we followed. Where is it? The kids searched through the compact gray blanket for a glimmer of light and of hope. The light was gone. The fog was so enveloping they could not even see the chasm or the Ents anywhere. They felt it thickening, closing in on them as if seeping into their skin. They started to turn in different directions, panic overtaking them as they realized they had lost all sense of direction. One wrong move and they might end up falling into the chasm. "What do we do?" Manuel said, voicing the fear they were all feeling but didn't want to admit. Xavier took a breath, trying to think. Chaos, confusion. Ruach had described them as the trademarks of Paneros. The enemy wanted them to be confused. That's what this fog was about. But they had the armor, the breastplate. He remembered standing in the sandstorm, waiting for the breastplate to tell him what to do. Sometimes it took a while. They had to be patient. "Just hang on, everyone," Xavier said. "Stay calm. Just wait." He looked down at his own breastplate, waiting, breathing. The others did as well. After what seemed like an eternity, their breastplates flickered with a gentle light. Xavier let out a breath he'd been holding and began turning until the light became steady. The others did the same. Unlike the last time they were together, their breastplates all pointed in the same direction. "Levi, you have that scroll?" Xavier asked. "Yeah," Levi said. He pulled the scroll out of his pocket. "I got it." "Good," Xavier said. "Follow me, but as quiet as possible." No one argued with him, not even Evan. He'd gotten them over the bridge without anyone saying it out loud. They'd made him their leader. "If you see anyone," Levi said, "don't talk to them. Don't even look at them. Especially," he looked down momentarily, "if they look familiar." Xavier nodded to him. "Right." All right, that's the end of chapter 21. I will read the next one tomorrow. It's only a few pages. Maybe I'll read 2 chapters tomorrow since 22 is only like 5 pages. Let's see. We're getting so close to the end of the book, you guys. Oh, that one's long. Anyways, we'll see. 25 and then the epilogue. All right, kiddos.